attached to the text lecture right before this one, you should find a file for download called images.zip. As you guessed, this contains a couple of different images that we're going to show on our different pages as big backgrounds. I'm going to extract the contents of that file, and here are my 4 images. So they have names like home.jpg, performance, reliability, and scale. The number 1 location where we place these images into our project is the public directory. This public directory is a perfect place to host static assets, such as images or video or anything like that, anything we want to make available for download. I'm going to take those 4 images and drag and drop them into the public directory. All right, so now that those images are in there, we need to actually show them inside of our different pages. We could do so by making use of classic image HTML elements. And that would definitely work, but there's a slightly better way to show images when we're making use of Next. And that is by using the built-in image component. So this is a component that is provided to us by Next itself. The image component is super special in that it behaves very similar to a normal image element, but it's optimized specifically for loading up images in a couple of different scenarios. In particular, making sure that images get loaded up in a very performant fashion. We can use this image component with locally hosted images. So those are images that are hosted inside of your project, or remote images. So those would be images that are hosted somewhere online. The number 1 thing that this image component does whenever we deploy our application, so whenever our app is running in production mode, if a user tries to access our page when they are on, say, a much smaller screen size, the image component is going to detect that. It's going to say, hey, I need an image that suits this very small screen. But our original image hosted on our server might be really large. Let's say maybe 6,000 by 4,000 pixels. So this image component is going to send a request off that says, I need to copy this image, but my screen is only 800 pixels wide. Behind the scenes, your Next server is going to take that really big image and resize it down to something that is much more appropriate, maybe 1020 by 1080 pixels. And then it's going to take that image and send it back in response. That means that your mobile device gets to download this much more appropriately, much smaller sized image, which will hopefully load up much faster. This image resizing process only happens one time on server. So once the image has been resized, it's going to be saved in cache on the server. It doesn't need to be resized again. The image component does a couple of other things besides this, but this is kind of the big ticket item that makes it super useful whenever we have a super image heavy environment. All right, so let me show you how we actually use this thing. In its most basic form, it's going to be very similar to a plain image HTML element. It's really nothing too crazy. So let's work on showing an image on our app page file first. So that's our home page. To get started, at the very top, I'm going to import image from next/image. Then I'm also going to add in an import for the actual image file that I want to display on the screen. So that's going to be the home.jpg file inside the public directory. To import that, we could again write out a really long relative import like so, or we can use another little built-in shortcut, which is in this case, public. That's kind of a shortcut to the public directory of our project. So inside of our public directory, I want to get home.jpg. Then inside of my div right here, I'm going to display an image element. The src is going to be whatever we imported for the actual image file. So that's going to be home img. We then also have to provide some alt text. This is a string that is used by anyone who can't actually see the image. So most common example would be someone who's using a screen reader of sorts. This text is going to be displayed or read off in place of the actual image. So it's just something that another person can read and kind of understand the purpose of this image. If I open up the home.jpg file itself, you'll notice that it's kind of a car factory of sorts. So I'm going to use alt text here of car factory. It's a plain description of what the image is actually showing. Back over inside the browser, I can see the image very easily, taking up the entire screen. But if I zoom out to 100%, well, it's not quite taking everything up. So we're going to add in a little bit more styling here to make sure the image fills up the entire screen. And I also want to make sure that it's kind of sitting behind our text. So this is kind of the look we are eventually going for. To do this, back inside my editor, here we go. I'm going to find the image component. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here. I'll then add on a prop of fill, a style that's going to be an object. So notice the two sets of curly braces there. I'll give it a object fit property of cover. And then I'm going to wrap this entire image component with a div that has a class name of absolute -z -10 and inset -0. I'll then save this. I'm going to flip back over. And there we go. Now it's filling up the entire screen. It's going to appear like the text just disappeared on the top left-hand side. Don't worry, the text is still there. It's just really hard to see because it is a black font on a very dark background. So we need to eventually come back and change the coloring of the text, preferably to be white or something like that. We'll take care of that styling in a little bit.